I saw lots of videos on YouTube talking about the problem of consciousness, and they were acting as if it was a problem that hasn't been solved already. So I thought I would share with you what I understand about it. I don't really think it's that hard. Um, I think the hardest part about it is that modern people tend to dismiss the importance of the subjective experience. And, well, I guess subjective isn't objective because I consider objective to mean like things that everyone can agree on easily, such as that if you see something, everybody agrees that yeah, the thing is there. But the subjective experience is basically what makes us alive, and obviously being alive is a part of consciousness. So dismissing the reality of subjectivity is why the problem is so hard. And I consider a living being basically to be some entity which is subject to internal imperatives, or basically, to make it simpler, it has ideas of good and bad, and its ideas of good and bad direct its behavior. So I actually believe, I've talked about this in other videos, that all experience, whatever, at least experienced by humans, can be divided into the sensory, like what you see with your eyes, intellectual, what you think about, and that can also be thought of as abstract, or thoughts about other thoughts. That's abstract thought. I suppose there can also be concrete thought, like flame is the cause of heat. That's a sensory kind of thought. And then thirdly, the other aspect of experience are values, or beliefs about good and bad. So that preference, it's necessary to get that out of the way as a prerequisite to talking about other things. And then it's also important to think about what's actually in the brain, and it's a neural network. And that's different from a regular traditional computer that we're familiar with, because traditional computers, every component in a traditional computer is made to do a specific task, and it's very, very good at doing what it was designed to do, but it can't do anything apart from what it was designed to do. And neural networks are different because they're not designed to do any particular thing. For any particular task, most of the neurons in a neural network are going to be redundant. And I have actually worked with artificial neural networks briefly in a machine learning course, so I actually kind of understand this a little bit. Anyway, so for any particular task, most of the neurons in a neural network are going to be redundant. But that's a good thing because you don't know ahead of time which neurons are going to be redundant. And for one task, neurons which are redundant, those neurons might be useful for a different task. So basically, a neural network has lots of potential that's not realized yet. And when you throw something at the neural network, through experience, the neural network will figure out how to solve the problem. And it won't be as efficient as a computer that was designed to do that task from the get-go. But what's really special about the neural network is it can figure out how to do it without being explicitly told how to do it. And then, of course, neural networks come up with models for understanding things which it didn't previously have. So like if you feed data about housing, like where the house is located, how many rooms it has, how old it is, whatever, if you make a neural network smart enough, it can probably figure out, it can probably predict with some degree of accuracy what the price would be of that house from the data I just told you. And so the point is the neural network can come up with a model for understanding some aspect of reality without being explicitly taught. And then I think all those components I just talked about make up consciousness. So I basically just see consciousness as a model for the self and understanding the rest of the world. Well, I don't see it's something particularly special about humans. Like a bird, when it grooms itself, it must have some model for understanding the self when it does that. And like a dog, when it interacts with you, I guess it's mostly focusing on you, but if the dog didn't realize that the dog was there and talking to you, it would seem hard to me to imagine that it would be able to communicate to you if the dog didn't have at least some rudimentary understanding of self. And I just see my own model of self as being more complicated than that because I have a bigger neural network, and that's really all there is to it. So in summary, I see consciousness as basically just a model for understanding the self, and so I suppose probably the self's interaction with the outside world, and that comes from a neural network, and ideas about good and bad are what direct the neural network and help you make decisions. They tell your ideas about good and bad tell the neural network what it ought to be thinking about, and then when it has a decision to make, you base your decision off of what you consider good and bad to be. And as a side note, I built an AI for a 4-in-a-row game once, and the way it worked was it calculated lots and lots of things, and every little calculation it would assign points to the rows you could play in, and whichever row had the most points, that's where the AI would play. And those points are kind of a rudimentary representation of good and bad. And I'm pretty sure, I hard-coded the point calculation in, but I'm pretty sure if you stuck a point system like that into a neural network, you get very complicated behavior. And actually this has been done before. You can look up on YouTube, there are evolution simulators. I'm pretty sure they do the same thing. They give some artificial organism some kind of idea of good and bad, and the artificial organism has a neural network, and the creator of the simulator lets it run, and he knows that based on what he's given the organisms, they're going to figure out smart ways of surviving, even though he hasn't explicitly taught them how to do that. And if you just add complexity to the neural network and give it enough information to work with, I don't see that the transition from that artificial organism in the simulator which chases food, I don't see why the transition from that to me would necessarily not be smooth. Like, why is consciousness some kind of, like, at what point from the artificial food chasing organism in the simulator to a bird, to me, like where in that is not a smooth transition. I don't really see where the problem of consciousness comes from. Anyway, so consciousness is a model for the self, and for humans that comes from a neural network with values. The model is built up from that, and that's all.